Learnings that you have from the UK that you think we need to bring in here?
Well, I think I think they've gone for it. Obviously, they've mandated BIM across the public sector in the UK, which has been a big driver and a big change for the industry over there. And of course, that means all the design teams at procurement stage are set up for it. Everyone understands what. Well, look, there's plenty of places where it could fall down in between, but I think there is a variety of forms of contracts used in the UK. Some of which are being used here, but I would say that the NEC form of contract, particularly the option C, I've done a lot of work at civils. The ECI option C, NEC form of contract is a very plain, collaborative, plain English collaborative form of contract. It works very well. And then some of these integrated delivery partner models, the likes of the Great Ormond Street one I mentioned, and there's others out there. They run very good frameworks, which have continuous improvement built in, like Highways England, would build that in. Some of the other public sector frameworks they work over there, generally generates the expectation that things are done in a certain way, and then that keeps going through. So it's less transactional when you're in that sort of situation.
And if possible, less adversarial, which is a big problem we have here.
Yes.
Thank you. So I'd like to open it to the floor. If you could say your name and the company you're with. Thank you.
Hi, name is Jamie Mulcair from Robridge. I've a question for Bruce, actually. Just listening to Johnson Controls yesterday, Donald O'Sullivan, and how you might integrate those controls into FM, into your business. You were talking about that water leak earlier. Would that be like an actuated valve that you could actually turn off so you wouldn't have to go into these spaces in future? And is that something that you're looking into and try to automate that whole system?
I didn't hear all of that.
Okay.
Believe it or not.
Yeah, no, I was just talking about the Johnson Controls yesterday. Donald Sullivan was talking about. And we were talking about the water leak earlier in your presentation, and we were just wondering, is it something that you'd be looking towards where you'd try to automate those systems, where you'd have an actuated valve that can be controlled by a control center so you wouldn't have to send people out and all that, and that maybe there was a flow meter in the whole system, that everything would be automated and would shut it off, etc. Just for those instances. Is that something that you'd be looking towards?
Yeah, okay, good question. I'm going to start off with something that I tell my people, and as we've gotten on this journey and as we're doing our first full implementation, keep the threshold low enough. We have a small team, we're very focused, there are a lot of opportunities, so we've sort of prioritized what we're trying to do on first pass. As we've moved down that path towards getting where we're at right now, we have very consciously left doors cracked open. We've left some wide open. There are very few that we have closed with full intent of coming back after getting over sort of the current threshold here. And that's absolutely part of it. Controls, BMS, can we actuate remotely in the future? Absolutely. There are all kinds of potentials. If we tried to do it all at once, we wouldn't get over the threshold of this initial offering. And being an owner and trying to sell this to the C-suite across the street, what we're doing, and to remain productive and getting a return, we have to get over that threshold, show our success, show our savings, and then reinvest in next steps and raising that threshold bar as we move forward. So yes, I'm excited by all the possibilities.
Thank you. Thank you. Have we more questions yet?
Yeah, hi Don. Shane Brody, BIM and Scan Limited. My question is more or less to the panel, whoever wants to take it at a strategic level. So Bruce, in all your slides you had TCO, so total cost of ownership. And my question is total cost of ownership really, and the analysis through TCO, the real enabler to getting to integrated project deliveries, to getting to use information collaboratively, and is that the mindset that's really needed, or should we just, particularly in Ireland, should we just carry on going lowest cost?
I'll take a first shot. I'll take a first shot at that one. For myself, being an owner and being a part of an ownership group over a series of hospitals, regional hospital group, part of my task, my job every year is, forward-thinking strategy. What are we doing over the 3, 5, 10? Generating a capital ask and being able to back up my capital ask with a sort of prioritized information base to speak to decision making. Part of what we absolutely want to introduce more of is risk avoidance in that conversation. And so a complete life cycle view, which is supported and fed by data coming out of our buildings and how we operate them, becomes the tool for those sort of drives. I think it's very important, and I think it'll be more and more enabled over time as we move towards this solution.
Would you like to come in on that?
Yeah, I certainly I'm interested that BIM bubble, was clearly disconnected, and I don't know whether in this room we are all inhabiting that BIM bubble. Very important that we don't. And I think when you ask the question TCO, which I think to me total cost of ownership, I'm trying to say, okay, maybe we've just left the BIM bubble, so it's great. There is somebody to whom that's important. If it's the managing director of NHS Health Trust, for example, actually TCO is only part of his remit, is the total health care of the community that he's serving. So it may already be reductive. But what is great is now we are actually saying, what is the outcome that we want to improve through the use of technology? And let's go to anything you want. I think we're a little bit in trouble with the use of BIM because immediately people reformat their thinking to something, what that something might be, but they're certainly not talking about what, we saw it in the brilliant map that was shown, what matters to everybody else. So TCO, if you are owner, operator, that may be what is your objective, definitely, and then you will be asking yourself, where are my massive levers? And I think you will reframe the conversation really interestingly on the fact that your 80-20 or your 80-10-20, with all due respect to the tech vendor that are paying for us in the room, I know that they make their money selling their tech to architects. But that sort of in a disconnected way solves maybe a little bit of construction cost through better predictability against which you can execute lean. It doesn't address your 80 cents. Now, I know they make money selling to architects or to engineers, but the TCO problem suddenly restates the BIM problem. And no, let's use the technology where it makes a difference. And I think that's where, Bureau Happold, when we are asked the question, it says actually, the technology to make drawings faster, that's like 5 years ago question, and it's not really a question for engineering practice, which they were making drawings is not why we exist. So if BIM is about making drawings, we really don't want to talk about BIM. It's like email. You're great at email. You're great at BIM. Fantastic. No. I wanted a great design that lower my total cost of ownership. Can BIM help with that? Then come and talk. Otherwise, just stay in your bubble. It's a great question.
Got a little anecdote which might help. So my last...
Can everybody hear the speakers? Yeah.
My last project in practice, we did a really high-level BIM project for a university. We did as much as we possibly could. We created 380,000 bits of data. We asset tagged 74,000 assets on an estate for a new building on an estate which dated back to the 1950s. And in a BIM, we won loads of awards, BIM awards for it, and we were really proud of ourselves. And I go back to the site about 6 months later and talk to the facilities team, who basically they were totally overloaded. They weren't using this information, and I think that taking a little bit of a step back and everybody getting on a journey for those teams to have understood, what that team have is planned preventative maintenance schedules, an asset list, and some regulatory requirements on things. And if we were to help them deliver that, which we did, but we gave them this huge other beast with it, I think they should have used that and then worked with that for a little while, and then come back and said, actually, this is great. We're doing what we were doing before, but much better. Now, what can we do to achieve more? That would have been a better process, rather than just dumping on them this huge BIM model, which was highly complex, and they just weren't ready for it. They weren't trained, and that's really what the UK government soft landings is all about. It's about focusing on what you do at the moment and how can you do it better. And then, rather than trying to do all the flashy stuff can come, but you've got to take people on a bit of a journey, and for them to understand the process.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm 100% behind that. And our perspective from facilities, what we did was when we first looked at the project and said, what do we want out of it without burdening the project with extraneous sort of requirement or specification, we literally took 781 line items of division components that go into building, into construction. We sat in a room with our boots on ground folks, our chief engineers, and we went through every single line item. We prioritized. We said what needed to be in, what needed to be out from our perspective to take care of patients, to do regulatory, to be safe, everything that was in our current CMMS system. And we ended up with, that's where our 7% or our 5% model came from. And that highly specified 5%, whether it was an increase in the LOD level from a constructible 300 LOD to a 500 LOD, or to a 400 with an added data requirement on it, we tried to minimize but be very specific on the data set we were taking. And rough numbers, we're calling it 5 to 7% of the total information. Otherwise, it becomes too big, too much information, too dense, and we can't be agile with it, and we can't solve real world problems. But over time, it'll robust. We'll get more and more educated.
Same again with everyone else, really. We've had clients that actually not so experienced with BIM, but they've actually asked for, like, we want everything or as much as possible. And we've actually said, look, just tell us what we've actually sat down and actually gone through that process until they actually understand that you would only need certain bits of information at certain stages. You don't want to overload them with information, is what other people are saying as well. And that's exact principle I've always known as well. Especially with LOD with different REBA stages, that's always been a key fact for us as well.
Thank you. I mean, it's something actually that we're in the Institute of Architects that we're looking at, is that we need to enable and to promote a smarter client, so that they're looking at the outcome of what they want and putting the processes in place. And I think that's so important, that very often with too much focus on the process and not at the outcome. And I think that collaboratively we do all need to work on this. Are there any other questions? Ralph? Have we a microphone here? Oh, sorry, excuse me, I didn't see. Ralph, I'll come back to you. There's a question at the back.
Hi, David O'Brien, KC Facilities Management. Again, Bruce, you're on for this question. It's partly answered anyway, thank you for the 5%. I was wondering where that was going to come from. But you mentioned at the start that you had to get involved by basically requesting that you could get involved with the design team, and at that stage, and you were delighted when it happened. Do you now have a framework for actually engaging at project level? Carl mentioned the soft landings framework, which also has post-occupancy evaluations, and do you do any of those?
Okay, very good question. When we built the hospital that came live, the big one in the Children's in 2015, we'd been involved from demolition of the buildings that were there before. We had buy-in from my leadership, from senior leadership on the project team, from the designer, the architects, and that process of being involved started off being kind of a rough involvement, right? When the project team has facilities sitting at the table, facilities in the field, facilities validating. It was a little bit rough. And then over time, then the recognition that we were there just to help where possible, to help validate, to vet, to provide information and background, and then to move into a more of a component of the project team. We're part of that. On the current building, where that process was in place, we were familiar. We all know each other. I have groups of engineers that work with the field, the trade guys. And we started off with validation in the field, and we're on iPads and we're doing 3D validation. I have people ask me, it is so easy, you know, what's written in contract, what's a deliverable? It's in the field, right? Well, that's not really the case. What happens in the field a lot of times, so things slide. When we did our valve validation and our access panels, we started off with probably 60 errors on the first floor. Second floor, we were down to 40. Third floor, we were at 20. Fourth floor, fifth floor, sixth floor, less than 6 each time. And it was a communication process. As we spoke with our builder and the VDC and the architectural VDC folks, the BIM folks, we realized that was a pinch point. And then for the trades, they sort of felt like this is all coming through one person. He's asking for, coming from the VDC on the constructor side. So we said, you know what? Let's get a face. Let's start a working session. We started meeting with trades and working out some of their beefs about why do we need to model this. We relaxed some of our standards, feeling the pain from, say, the electricians on modeling half-inch conduit. We came to some very real give and take sort of propositions, and I think that's important. Tools to do it. I'm very open to looking at tools to further that effort. And so we do have a framework. We have a meeting framework. We have a process, and happy to share all that.
Thank you. Rob?
Yeah, thanks. Just want to thank everyone for fantastic talks and discussions about collaboration and outcomes, beginning with the end in mind, all fantastic stuff. The reality is in Ireland, and particularly, Owen, you mentioned public procurement, is we have a contract, we have a bespoke government contract, which is guaranteed maximum price, pushing risk, adversarial, and we have a government that's totally invested in that contract. They've spent 11 years developing that capital framework, and there's probably zero chance, and I'm guessing that nobody who's in control of that is in this room today. Like nobody from the Office of Government Procurement. If there is, it would be fantastic, but I'm guessing. So nobody's listening to that conversation, and so the outcome is, for Ireland, is we're one of the most expensive places to build stuff in, I think, almost definitely in Europe, but the world. Like, we've got high labor rates combined with this sort of adversarial, wasteful contracting. So maybe, Owen, like, how would we ever begin to change that environment where we have a government that's completely invested in their framework?
Look, there are working groups set up to encourage more collaboration, and you're right. It's a big change management exercise, and hopefully the people in this room will go out with the message that we all need to just keep focusing on changing that. You look at the digital roadmap. There is, to enable that, you need to change the form of contract. And so if the government commits to this, they need to understand that they need to commit to changing the form of contract. Otherwise, you're not going to do it. I think the Lean Construction Institute is also looking at, because Lean doesn't work with adversarial contracts either. So all of these great things that we're trying to do as an industry and that the government is supporting on one hand, you can't do one without the other. So at some point, we just have to address the fact that it's not going to work if we just keep going down this road. I don't think the outcomes they're getting for the government form of contract are the right outcomes. I think there's the smallest changes starting to come in terms of more value-based decision making around tenders. more openness to other international practices which are more collaborative. And the industry has to move forward, and we have to move to productivity. If you look at, you're right, I mean, there is tender inflation. Inflation is rising in Ireland. But if you look at volume of change, you know, that's waste. Change is waste on projects. And so some of this is down to change on projects, waste, you know, information flows. You know, you're looking at an environment in the government works form of contract. Contractors aren't going to make real returns in order to invest, to improve. So you're into either a vicious cycle or a virtuous cycle, and we can choose. And a virtuous cycle is one where we invest in the industry. You know, I know this Disruptive Technologies Innovation Fund came along recently. I'm not sure if any construction sector people had any luck with that, but you know, you look at something like that to say to yourself, disruptive technologies to improve national productivity. Well, why don't, I'm not sure if anything's happened, but I'm just saying that would be a great example of being able to do things innovatively to try and help us push some of this through the industry. So I think I think one of the keys to making it less expensive is to actually moving to more collaborative, more productive, less change-oriented contracting. I mean, we do have a great, you know, the funny thing is it's like a two-track industry, really, isn't it? You know, we're doing brilliant foreign direct investment work. We're an attractive place for foreign direct investment. Labour costs are rising, and it's something we really need to keep an eye on. And with labour costs rising, making labour more productive is one of the key things we have to do. But we're also exporting great talent, and in fact, you know, with the public sector procurement as it is, you know, the talent might be better in some instances doing foreign direct, doing that kind of international work, because it's just not, doesn't make sense to sometimes tender some of this work. So that's, you know, I think the change has to come. I think we're going to have to reach a roadblock. If you're trying to do lean construction, if you're trying to do the digital roads map through the National Building Council, these things just, you know, we need to just face up to it. It has to change. And I think, I think to be fair to the public sector, you know, there's public procurement is there's a legal and there's all sorts of blocks, and there's you know, there's value for, the perceived value for money and real value for money is something that's an educational process which we need to help the public sector with, and some of those working groups and the CIF and things like that can, I hope, help to create better cost benefit decisions and value for money decisions in our industry. So that's what I think.
In support of everything that Owen's referring to here, we're gifted with these projects, our IPD, Modified IPD with best value, which is another component that we're gifted with through the government. That allows a lot of what I've been speaking about on my particular projects here, our projects, to happen. And it was truly, it is collaborative. Early on, I felt a real rub with the architect, and it was, you know, the concept of we're value editing. We're taking out, we're removing to keep costs down. Once we're involved in that conversation, then we got a much better perspective from the project, from the contractors, the pressures they're feeling, and then to incentivize the team, the contractors, the subs, the architect. Everybody wins to some extent. We left the project coming in 200 mil under a $1.6 billion budget 2 weeks early, so that's cutting it close maybe, but the most important part, we all left the table and the project with a bright and shiny object, excellent project, and we all felt vested in it, and everybody had shared in sort of the savings and the reward, and that really keeps things marching forward.
I mean, just to add to that, there is a review of the public sector contract underway at the moment, and all of the parties to the CIC, CIF, ourselves, SESI, are inputting into it. And I would advise anybody who is concerned about it to write into the OGP with their comments on it. There is an appetite at the moment for change, because I think the public sector also realise that the contract and the system is not delivering for them. And from our perspective, the more effort that can be put into the briefing session and the setup section of a project, the better the outcome. And we really need to ensure that our contracts support that. So there is an appetite for change. But also a driver is going to be that, as Owen has said, less people within the design sector and the contracting sector are going to be applying for public sector jobs, because there is a better alternative. We've just carried out a survey of our own members, and it's shown that those who aren't involved in public sector, while they have an interest in it, feel they can't afford to take the risk. They feel it is a too big a cost risk. So something has to change. And I think that at the moment there is an appetite, and we all need to work together to make sure that whatever the outcome of this review is, that there is a much better system that supports quality in the long term. End of my podium speech. Back to questions from the floor. I'm not sure where the microphone is. One from Alan. Oh yeah, great. One down.
Hello.
Yep.
My name is Amr. I'm with DIT and I work with my group. My question is to Owen and Bruce, and it's in regards to increasing the performance in the facilities management side of the building. So the question is, have there been any sort of link between the facilities management to the reporting side of the building to a BMS system, and something that will provide key performance indicators rather than resolving an issue when it arises and limiting the location where an issue could potentially arise and then investigating it? Is there anything that links to a key performance indicator that would highlight an issue before it actually occurs through, let's say if we're looking at a pipework that is supposed to have a certain flow, volumetric flow, it will not reach a certain volumetric flow, then it automatically rises a key performance indicator telling me that there is something potentially wrong, and that would give me more preventive measures rather than fixing it when it's broken.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. What we're trying to do here is create a framework, a digital twin, that then can be the collection point, the dissemination point, and be tied to a CMMS system that can provide us sort of those predictive analysis. Let's say we're taking in vibration on a motor, and we know, because there's a lot of those out there on an air handler, that this is the range it operates in, and when that thing starts heading out, that information is relayed to us through the work order system to tell us, hey, come take a look at this air handler, I'm starting to go out of range. So predictive analysis to get there before it fails. And I think this particular building is coming up live on an IBM blog on Watson IoT. I know GE, Siemens, Honeywell, a lot of the big players. We're working with a couple to look at what sort of blanket system can we have that will sit and absorb all of the back data, the back net, all the different formats for those indicators to come into the information from the automation system so that we can start working with it. And I think that's the most exciting part of what I'm looking at in the next couple of years as an operator of hospitals. I want to know about air, I want to know about water, I want to be predictive and not reactive to flooding. Yeah.
Just a small point, I mean, maybe on a less technology but more process point of view, and it's interesting that DOTs, like Grange Gorman, obviously where we're doing the PPP, you know, we've got design, build, and then maintain. So that whole process is through, you know, so in terms of maintenance, the maintenance requirements are built in really well into the design process, such that as you're building, you know, the maintenance team are constantly involved with our project team on the site in order to keep making sure that what we build and the design outcomes are fit for purpose for the maintenance. So just on a simple process point of view, that's what's happening at DIT.
Thank you. I think our final question.
Yeah, no, just to reiterate what Ralph said, the collective performance of presentations were exemplary. You know, they were absolutely fantastic. I mean, the mix of architecture, the engineering message, you know, the contractor. What was very refreshing as well, I thought, was Ben, you mentioned BIM level 1 a lot. I think the more we talk about level 1 and not level 2 in Ireland, the better. You know, that it's a starting point. But I suppose just picking up, maybe it's not directed at any particular one of you, but just picking up on what Alan said in particular, there is no alternative, and there was a very kind of singular moment when you were, there was quite a lot of passion coming from you there, that if companies don't change, do you feel that they will be left behind and they will not be able to work in this new way? And maybe secondly for Owen, how are you then supporting your supply chain, your subcontractors, to work the way you want them to work? Because people are struggling. 95% of the industry are not doing this. So how do we move this forward?
I think it's great to see that you have leadership and then education and training. And
yes.
We're saying we have a problem because people are leaving the industry. We say we have a problem because people don't come to the industry. We're Apple in London, next to Facebook. I want people walking down the street and approaching our offices to think, yeah, Facebook is nice. I can get some videos of cats up on the internet. I can rig the election. But actually, there is a better thing to do with my life. Let's make the built environment better. And I think that's the message that the leadership needs to bring. So it's not a change kind of threatening message. I think you talked a lot about it's fun, it's great, it makes the industry, yeah, I want to go to work to site, I've got an iPad, the information is doing. Did you really do how many years of architectural school to go and put things on a drawing? And I think let's celebrate the fact that our industry finally is going to be so much more fun.
Yeah, I mean, the bit that the government of Ireland don't get is this is not a transformation programme. It's a 4-year transition programme, of which we've already missed 1 year. So my final comment would be, I suppose the KPIs were mentioned earlier on this roadmap. Are they realistic to drive capital costs down by 20% through lean, increase Irish exports by 20% through more, by improving your skill set and so on, and also driving time down, delivering quicker? I mean, is that realistic in Ireland, bearing in mind the 2% margin you talk of?
Yeah, so just pick up on the two things. One is how do we support our supply chain, and then the second is around those three points. And I think supporting our supply chain, one of the things we have to recognise in Ireland, we've got a great mechanical and electrical, we're absolutely, some great people in the industry in Ireland in that space, and great contractors and companies in that space. So when you look at how do we support people on a project in order to go to digital project delivery, so remember we're thinking about technology on a number of different fronts here. So from the BIM point of view, it's clearly around the designers, and it's really the mechanical and electrical, it's really important. Steel work, things like that, that fits very naturally in. Some of the other parts of it, it's more around the tools you use to improve quality outcomes. So the iPads out in the field, using digital tools out in the field and that works for every subcontractor. That you don't have to be a big MEP subcontractor to work with that, and it's just helping people use that. So I think there's a couple of different levels of support that we give on our projects, and then the information flows, of course, because once you're doing that on an iPad, it quickly goes back, and the information is closed out quickly. You can see the photograph of what we're trying to solve, and not just go to this room and then it's this snag and it's halfway up the wall. So it's a lot, or there's a tag there that gets lost. So that's the simple stuff. And then in terms of the three objectives: export, program, and cost. So I mean, export. When I talk about that twin track thing, a lot of our exports are towards our big international, foreign direct investment companies in Ireland who can see that we're good at, we've got a good delivery culture, and so we are exporting that abroad. And I think the more that we can use our digital tools to amplify the quality of our delivery, I think we can certainly hit that export piece, and I think as I say, we're going to hit it through foreign direct investment anyway, through what we do for those international clients. We're not going to hit it through the government the way the government sort of public sector procurement is at the moment. I think getting to the program certainty, reducing program times is all about the change and program. Change during the course of construction is what's going to delay projects. So if we can deal with this in the design phase, or in an early contractor involvement between the design and the contractors, that's the key. So that will get us to our program, certainty. And then in terms of the cost reduction, I think the cost reduction, you know, that's a slightly, you got to have a more deeper answer to that, because you got to look at the current cost of construction through the government form of contract and the outcomes that we're getting, and then whether, and that's not just the input price, it's the exit price, but it's the, and then it's trying to, you know, have a more value-based decision on that, you know. Yeah. So that's, I think we could get there, but I think, you know.
So will the tech company be the contractor of the future?
Well,
like in other industries, so it'll be disrupted, because if you can't build quicker, faster, get off-site quicker, and use off-site manufacturing more routinely, then someone else will come in and just disrupt that and take your business from you.
You were asking a question about change, but I have this international perspective, and I think it's really interesting. We're talking about procurement and contract. One of the things that forces the contract to change is when you get disrupted. So Tesla asked the American construction industry, can you build this factory for me? Their answer was not interesting to Tesla. They said, you're too slow, you're too expensive, we'll do it ourselves. The American construction industry said, you're crazy, you'll never succeed, and they beat their own targets and beat what the best of the construction industry in America thought was impossible. So the same happens with Facebook data center, the same happened with Amazon data centers. Let's be very aware. The sixth fastest unicorn in any industry is a construction company. It already exists. The Uber moment of our industry has already happened.
Okay. I think there's actually one final question.
Go to Shane again, but my question originally I was going to just point out about the FDI, but Owen has answered it admirably. Ireland is excellent value for FDI, always has been, and it's outcomes based because it's related to the outcomes in TCO. My final question, it's not probably, I'm just wondering if Alan needs any crew for his next trip on a boat. A volunteer.
Well, maybe you can link in with them in that and the coffee. So I'd just like to thank all of our speakers for their really excellent presentations and for their contributions to the discussion. So if you could show your appreciation for them. Thank you.